Hello and welcome. Today I want to talk about managing your studies along with a part time job. So, during my master's, I used to be a full time student by the day, and in the evenings, I used to work part time. So, the jobs I used to do were online, and I used to work as a content writer with two different companies. And sometimes I also used to freelance. So it was a lot of work on a daily basis, and I did not have holidays from that work because it was for clients outside of Pakistan. So I did my master's in Pakistan and I worked for companies or clients that were not in Pakistan. So, how did I manage that, and what are my takeouts and tips for others for managing that? First and foremost, it is stressful, it is difficult to manage, but if you absolutely have to do it, you need to fund yourself. And that is the case, I think, for most people in student life. You do need money to sustain yourself. And unless you are on a scholarship, you do need to work to manage everything, all the costs that come with being a student. Particularly in professional degrees, such as a master's, you do need a part time job. And if your undergrad degree is outside your own city or country, then you need a job there as well. So I had worked during my undergrad as well, but that was mostly as a volunteer or giving tuitions from home. So I wouldn't count that because that was just casual work. Although my volunteering work was almost full time, unpaid. I will talk about that some other day. But today I just want to talk about working along with a master's and what it takes. So, some of the tips that I would include here is to time block everything. Like, make your day into two halves, and if you cannot just half it, just make sure that you block separate times for your studies and for your work, and do not mix them. I know at times it can be difficult, especially during exams. It can be really stressful, but what you can do is whatever job you have, try and negotiate maybe a leave for a week or some days during your exams. And if that's absolutely not possible, it happened with me on many occasions because these were freelance jobs, and if I was off for a week, I would lose a lot of money. If that's not possible, then maybe prepare for your exams along with your daily study routines so that you do not have a lot of burden on the day of the exam. I know as much as you prepare, exams are still stressful, but if you prepare ahead, it just takes away the burden, it just takes away a bit of the panic. You will still panic most likely, but if you are prepared ahead, if you know the basics, then you are covered and you would do well. So along with my masters and along with working two or three jobs at a time every day, I did still manage to pass with a GPA of 3.6 out of 4. And in the long run, your GPA is not the ultimate thing. You do need to sustain yourself. So, my top tip is to block time and make sure that you do not mix your study time along with your job time. Just make them two separate things in a day and do focused work. Do not try to overlap them. The only way you can overlap or you should overlap is when you have large gaps between your classes and you can get work done. And this is for remote jobs where you're allowed to work remotely. If it's a physical job, a job at a restaurant or a coffee shop, then you cannot do this. You obviously have to show up for those hours. But for the kind of work that I was doing, it was a bit flexible in that it was all online and I could manage my time as long as I am delivering the stuff before the deadline or on the deadline. So, what I used to do was take my laptop with me during the classes, and if I had a break of 1 or 2 hours, I would try and get some word count into it and make sure that some of it is done. So, time blocking, managing your time efficiently, and making sure that you utilize the time in the day and do not let time trickle by doing nothing and then panicking about either your studies or your work. That doesn't work. So, my number one tip is to manage your time efficiently. Time block your work hours, time block your study hours, and do not mix those two unless you're working remotely and can fit in different things between each other. Tip number two is to socialize. And I cannot stress this enough. If you are working full time or part time, and if you have a lot on your plate, if you're studying and if you're working together, that just makes a lot of work and a lot of things going in your head. That is not good for your mental health. So what you should do is to socialize, meet people, talk to them, because if you are constantly working, it might just get a bit too much and chances of burnout will be really high. Socialize, go out with friends, meet people, and just, in if not every day, on alternate days or once or twice a week, try to meet people, go out. What I used to do was, I used to work 7 days a week, but there used to be either Saturday or Sunday where I would definitely get out. I would go somewhere for sure with either friends, or sometimes if friends weren't available, I would also just go alone to a shopping mall, to a restaurant, just have a meal all by myself and give myself a break. And that was extremely important for me. I tried never to miss out on that, because then it became something that I look forward to throughout the week. If I couldn't take breaks during the weekdays, I would definitely go out once a week. And there were times when I did go out more than once a week, but that was just necessary because I was working about 16, 17 hours a day, combining my studies and my work, and that is just a lot. So just make sure that you take breaks, you socialize, you meet people, and you do not isolate yourself. Remember to enjoy and take a break at some point every week. Tip number three is something that I wish I had worked on myself as well, is to make sure that you sleep well, because if you do not sleep well, you will be stressed. And this happened with me quite a lot of times, because I was averaging on really low amounts of sleep. Most of the time it was maximum 5 hours, and on days where I had a lot of work it was 4 hours. But that's just not sustainable. That just makes you more stressed. It makes you lose health, and it makes you lose focus, and things that would normally take you an hour to finish then just expand and take more time. So just make sure that you sleep well, you manage your time well, and you make sure to give yourself a break and rest again, because good quality sleep is what determines how you will perform the next day. And because my performance was impaired many a times because of lack of sleep, I hope I had worked on this when I was doing part-time jobs along with my studies. And this is just something important that I want to emphasize for others and make sure that I remember in the future as well. On the note of sleeping well and taking your health as a priority, my number four tip is to reward yourself. Reward yourself for the work you do, for the hours you put in into your studies and your work. And this can again be in the form of socializing, in the form of going out. For me, it used to be one good meal per week. Because I was living in a hostel, I obviously hated the food there. So I just took that one day where I would go out. Also, the habit of just going out, going to a new place, or just breathing easily and just not thinking about work. Although it's hard to not think about work when you're working round the clock every day, but just try to take that one break per week. If you can take more, that's great, but just reward yourself with something. And if it's like the end of semester, or you have some days off from your work, just try to make sure that you reward yourself in some other way. Maybe take a holiday, go out for a day trip, go out for a weekend trip, and that would just be good for your health and for your sanity. And it will also be rewarding because you will feel refreshed when you come back to your studies and to your work. So rewarding yourself in any way that you find rewarding. Maybe you get yourself something new, maybe you buy a new book and indulge in reading, maybe you just go on a trip. Whatever works for you, just reward yourself with that, and it will help you to be refreshed and get back to work in a much better way. Tip number five, and most important, would be to manage your stress. And this is easier said than done, but you need to develop a peer group around you that would support you, to whom you could talk. Because considering if you are studying by the day and working by the evening, or whatever time suits you, whatever time plan you have, you do need people who you could talk to, your friends, people in your class, or people in your research group, or whatever studies you're doing. You need to have some people you could talk to, because in that way you will not only have someone to hang out with, someone you could talk your stress out with and discuss things, but it will also help you gain some peace of mind in terms of learning, in terms of your progress, and you can discuss your studies with them and make sure you are up to the mark with your studies, and you're not losing or falling behind in your studies just because you're working part-time or more than half the day. So what I used to do was, I used to study along with my friends. I had one or two friends at all times for every subject, because there were different classmates for certain different subjects at times. So I used to have at least one friend who would prepare with me for the exam, who would coach me, and if I'm good in that subject, I would coach them, and then we would just discuss what's happening. That just made me feel better prepared for the exam and made me feel like I'm not losing it completely, and I'm not just focusing on work, but I am actually focusing on my degree as well, which is the number one priority, because ultimately I believe it was the degree that I wanted to work towards, and that is why I was working part-time, because I wanted to fund that degree. So, not to fall behind on my studies, it was important. This is much easier said than done, because I was stressed at a lot of times. I did have like fallouts between certain clients, certain work groups, and there used to be times when I used to panic and think this would not work, and I have an exam tomorrow. How do I meet this deadline? And sometimes when I had already asked for a leave, I would still be given some urgent revision, because with writing there's always a lot of revision. So there are many points that just come up and you cannot predict them. Certain stressors just are thrown towards you and you cannot predict them. But if you actively try to talk to people, to manage your studies beforehand, and to do as much as you can to reduce the stress on yourself at a later point, whatever is in your power, just do it to reduce your stress. And that would be a way forward to managing your studies. So, all in all, the thing is that you need to time block, you need to manage your time well, have a good peer support group, talk to people, socialize, to not overstress, sleep well, eat well, and give yourself certain rewards for doing all the hard work. And hopefully, it will all be for the good. You're doing it for yourself, your studies, your work will all pay in the long run. And you will certainly enjoy it if you manage it well. Do not be too hard on yourselves. Just think clearly, manage things well, and just breathe. That is all from my side for today. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. And if you want to hear more from me and more about my PhD life, please subscribe to my channel. And I will see you in the next video. Bye.